Hello, fellow classmates. Apologize that this is getting put up later. Still before time, but I've had strep and so has my daughter for the past couple of days, so joining Prof. Davis and just the fun with that. And so if my voice is not very good and you can't understand me at any point, make sure you comment on this video to let me know that, and I can try to clarify it probably better via text than this. And so if this is not the most well done, I apologize, but I've done the best I can, being sick the past couple of days. My word is nation. The English word that I chose was nation, which is ethnos, Greek, which probably sounds pretty familiar with ethnographic research and different kinds of things. It's a very common well-known Greek word. There's 162 occurrences within the New Testament. At first I didn't believe there would be too many occurrences, but I did not take into account that this word is also the main word used in the Greek when Gentiles is found in most English translations. I did not realize that, and so it's a lot more than I expected or realized, and so we'll get more into that in just a minute. With the possible definitions that were given from the various resources from accordance, most of them were very similar. From the Complete Word Study Dictionary of the New Testament, we see that it means a multitude, people, a race belonging and living together, and that's probably the most general of the definitions that I found. Whenever you looked it up on accordance, it would say nation, people, Gentile, and so that's kind of those are the two kind of most general definitions that you could find there. But this from the Complete Word Study Dictionary of the New Testament, we do see that's one of them. Also, in this sense of a nation, a people distinct from all others, so there's a uniqueness to it. Also, we see that it means Gentiles or Gentile nations. In general, has spoken of all who are not Israelites, and it usually implies adultery and ignorance of the true God, heathen, pagan nations. So a lot of times whenever it's used, it's referring to Gentiles, but it's specifically referring to those who are heathen or pagan nations, basically those who aren't believing in the true God, Yahweh, or the God that we know. Generally designates a non-Jewish nation. I also found that as well. There's a lot more that they say in that dictionary, but a lot of it is just going along with those ideas. We see in Louw-Nida, it says the largest unit into which people of the world are divided on the basis of their constituent in a socio-political community, a nation of people, again a general one, but then it says also that it could refer to a term of tribe. We also see in Mounts, it says a multitude, a company, from Hebrew nations or people distinguished from the Jews, heathens, or Gentiles. Again, we see that as well. Strong says that a race, as of the same habit. Tribe, specifically a foreign, non-Jewish one, usually by implication pagan, Gentile, heathen, nation, people. So again, probably in some of the older translations of English, it probably does say heathen instead of Gentile in some of those places. I haven't gotten the chance to look at that at this point. I do want to kind of look at that going forward, although my chosen passage doesn't deal with this idea, which I kind of wanted to do one of those, but we'll get into that in just a second. But then we also see, we see that TDNT basically gives the same ideas, but it does talk about some of these stats I thought was interesting. Of some 160 New Testament instances, 40 are quotations from the Old Testament. This does not affect the general usage, but may give a special nuance in the context. 64 passages has no specific sense. The reference is to people or peoples. And so this is where it does basically just talk about a nation. But then it says, in some cases, however, one sense that Israel is not included among the nations. And so it's included. It's basically stating that Israel is not part of this group. If this word's used, it doesn't include Israel. In some 100 passages, it's undoubtedly the technical term for Gentiles as distinct from Jewish or Christian people. In many of the verses, it's very clear that this is the case, where Paul refers to this word being the people that he's called to, or it's very clear that the Gentile word needs to be here, and the nations wouldn't necessarily make sense in general terms. The quotation of many Old Testament passages shows how the Old Testament influences this primarily religious and ethnic distinction. In regards, the New Testament differs from the Greeks for often we see this used with people that are not Jewish. Thayer's dictionary again says a multitude of men or beasts associating, living together, a company, a troop, a swarm. We also see foreign nations not worshiping a true God, pagans, Gentiles, and Paul again uses this even of Gentile Christians. And so it's not just pagans as well. This word is a noun. It's a nominative. And I believe that it's a simple apposition serving to further define the nominatives that came before it, priesthood, and before that is a race, a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation. I forgot to say which passage I was going to be doing. The passage that I will be doing is 1 Peter 2:9. But you are a chosen race, a royal priesthood, a holy nation, a people for his own possession, that you may proclaim the excellencies of him who called you out of darkness into his marvelous light. And so we see, I believe it's functioning here as a simple apposition. I don't believe it's any of the other ones. I may be wrong there. I'll continue to look at it and research it in the coming days. I also see at this point with the nuances and the possible definitions, I have done very little research at this point, as the only article I could find other than what I've had on Accordance on the NTS's atlas was only available in print form. And so I won't have access to it until tomorrow when I get to the library NTS. And so it kind of limited me to what I'm going to be able to do. I looked up ethnos, and I've looked up nations in the New Testament, and some of the Gentile things. But that was the only thing I could really find was in the New Testament Studies journal that I could only get there. And so I've chosen this passage because we see here the word is translated to mean a big group of people that belong together, and we don't see it as Gentiles, so it's a little different than a lot of the occurrences. So I think that's important for us to kind of look and see what it actually means here compared to all the other Gentile groups. But they belong together. They're not bound by actual borders, as this word is also usually used to depict peoples from other than the Israelites. It is sort of expansion of the idea as God's chosen nation of the Old Testament, Israel. I kind of see it as his holy nation. A lot of times I think that would possibly, the nuance or the idea that you would get in the original context would be Israel would be God's holy nation, but we see here the Greek is using the word that's usually used for Israel or for Gentiles, non-Jewish. So I think that this is a very intentional, interesting use of this word to kind of show an expansion of the meaning of holy nations, that is God's holy nation. But I'm going to be looking that up more, but I think that is something that is to note here. I feel like this is also important for multiple other reasons. Amongst other occurrences, this is probably one of the most well-known that's translated into nation and not into Gentiles. It's important because we see this is a passage of being called out, describing, and being named. We as believers are given by Peter here a mission and a description of what we are and what we're to do. So I think that's very important. I also find it interesting that we see that sorry, it's my sickness trying to get over me, take over my thoughts, not make it clear. I also find it interesting, and maybe good to note, that here the same word used to often talk about Gentiles, again, or any nation that isn't Hebrew, again, is talking about God's holy nation, and it's not talking about Israelites. I hope to see if there's more connection, as I talked about earlier, with this. And I feel like this could be intentional. Maybe nobody knows this for sure, and probably isn't known for sure, but I feel like it might be an intentional way of looking at this. And so I'm going to be looking for similar ideas within research and articles. Again, I wish I could have chosen one of them with Gentile to kind of, that was maybe a little bit more fuzzy with the reason why it's translated in Gentile instead of nation. But again, it's looking like the only article I'm going to be able to find from a journal is going to be on this passage. And so 1 Peter 2:9 is going to be my passage. I hope all this made sense.